So our penultimate keynote for PRAXIS 10 is by a leader par excellence. We're delighted to have Prabha Narasimhan, Managing Director and CEO at Colgate-Palmolive, India. She's a graduate from IIM Bangalore and Melbourne Business School. Prabha comes with over 25 years of varied experience in customer development, consumer marketing, and innovation across multiple geographies. You remember when we kicked off the session with Rupa Unnikrishnan? Proud to say that Prabha calls Chennai her home. It's great to have a stalwart like you. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Prabha. We can do much better than that. Come on, let's give her a really nice welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was certainly not expecting an audience this large, but thank you very much to Amit and the entire team for having me here today. This is the very first time that I'm addressing an audience of PR professionals, so an absolute first for me and a privilege to be here. I do call Chennai my home, and this is why I'm giving up my Saturday to be here, and it's lovely to see all of you over here. If I could have the first slide, please. Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with a rather dangerous idea, which is to ask you to just for a minute in the middle of the afternoon, just close your eyes for just 1 second. And before you do that, as you close your eyes, we're going to flip to the next slide. And on that slide, there's going to be a choice. 2 images in which you've got to make a choice of 1 image. Yeah, so I hope you're with me. Just close your eyes. I'm going to flip the slide. Then we'll open eyes and we'll make the choice. So if I could request you just to close your eyes for a moment. Okay, you can open them and now make the choice. I sincerely hope that most of you in this room picked the toothpaste at the bottom. And there is a reason that I can take the liberty with my co-host there on top, Rajesh Mani. Rajesh and I have known each other for over 3 decades, and so I can take the liberty to use this. And I must tell you that apart from toothpaste, I would buy pretty much anything from him. But in this instance, I think the choice is clear, and I wanted to start with that just to build on what reputation, trust, and this entire conference is really all about. And to do that, I'm going to take the opportunity, because whenever I stand up here, we must play some advertising. So I'm going to take this opportunity to play our latest piece of advertising. If I could have the video, please.
நான் புது கோல்கேட் ஸ்ட்ராங் டீத் தான் வாங்குறேன்.
ஆனா பாட்டி, இது உங்களுக்கு எப்படி ஒத்து வரும்?
அட, இதான் பா ஊட்டச்சத்து தெரியுது என்னுடைய கட்டிங் மிஷினுக்கு.
கட்டிங் பண்ணது கட்டிங் மிஷின் என்னது? கடி 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 இதையும் கடி.
இதன் கால்சியம் பூஸ்ட் மட்டுமே பற்களுக்கு ஊட்டச்சத்து தந்து ஸ்ட்ராங் ஆக்கும். கோல்கேட் ஸ்ட்ராங் டீத் இது பேஸ்ட் மட்டும் இல்ல, பற்களுக்கு ஊட்டச்சத்தும் கூட.
So I wanted to start with that, because when you think Colgate, that is really the image I hope that comes to your mind, a brand that has existed in this country for over 85 years. We're actually in our 86th year in this country, and a brand that actually is synonymous with the idea of trust and reputation. So it's very hard actually to see that your teeth are getting stronger, but I hope that as I do, when you hear Colgate tell you that a given product will make your teeth stronger, there is an inherent belief that it will do that. And that's really what I wanted to spend a little bit of time on, the importance and how you build brand trust in the context today. And really, like I'm sure many speakers before, and I had the privilege of hearing the one before this have said, it is really becoming more and more important in this world where there is a plethora of information. A lot of the information actually is untrue. Our ability to differentiate between fact and fiction is becoming less and less, because the fiction is really becoming, it's kind of looking like it's fact quite often. And therefore, consumers are also becoming much more skeptical. Healthily skeptical, but definitely much more skeptical. And then you have so many more choices, right? Today you had a choice between Rajesh toothpaste and Colgate, and there are in every category, in every decision, in every product, there are a plethora of choices that you can exercise, and with those choices comes more judgment. more what am I going to do and what am I going to buy. And most of FMCG, a category which I've worked in for my entire working career, is actually decided in that split second, right? Every morning we don't wake up and sit in our bed and write a list of today my toothpaste is must do A, B, C, D, and these are the brands that do it and these are the brands that don't. There is a system one thinking that makes you make most of those choices. And that's judgment that you are now constantly exercising and consumers are constantly exercising. And of course, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, etc., world is creating a greater pressure for trustworthiness and a greater pressure for the brands and the companies and the people that have that trust to make sure that they're doing everything they can to nurture that trust. I've been a year in this organization, and it is truly a privilege to work in this organization. There are many, many organizations that measure trust and credibility. TRA is one of them, and Colgate has consistently been ranked in the top 5, not surprising, of the most trusted brands. But what actually I think is perhaps more critical and more a validation of the trust that consumers have in this brand is the statistic at the bottom. Colgate is actually the single most penetrated FMCG brand in this country. So 9 out of 10 homes in the period of a year will have used a Colgate toothpaste, which is quite an incredible statistic for a brand that is 85 years old and for a category that all of us know, use, and I hope use twice a day. And the company that this brand keeps, you can see a whole list of brands at the bottom over there, really famous, really household brands, and that's great company, and you are, of course, the company that you keep. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes on what we consider how to build brand trust or how to hold brand trust, because this is really a legacy that's been given rather than something that any of me or my team are building at the moment. I think the first one is to know what is your brand promise and to stay true to that brand promise. It can be quite exciting and quite seductive to keep moving it around, but that can never make for a good brand. And if you think of any of the brands that you love and have loved over a long period of time, there will be 1 or 2 things that hold that brand together as a thread, and that consistency really critical. The third part really that I wanted to talk about is this whole idea of dialogue. When I first started working, marketing was a monologue. We would sit in our office, we would create a piece of advertising, we would put that advertising out there and disseminate it to millions and millions of consumers in India, and we would go out and do some research and ask them for their opinion. And then we would assess whether that piece of advertising did the job that it was meant to do or not. Now we get feedback instantly. We put that toothless granny or cutting machine, as you want to call it, advertising out there, and instantly we had comments. Comments about the relationship between the grandmother and the grandchild, comments about how people have used Colgate, and this is exactly what I think of Colgate Strong Teeth. Comments about, what is this product and what is this ingredient that you're talking about? Tell me more. It was instant. And the ability for us to respond to that dialogue, which consumers are so generously having with us, really critical to brand trust, and how you respond to that dialogue also really critical. And the fourth one, never to be forgotten, is that eventually the purpose of a brand, a product, a company is to serve its consumers. And you must be adding value. If you're not adding value, eventually they will realize that you're not adding value and you will cease to be a part of their lives, and that one actually is quite easy. The storytelling part, creativity, and that's, I'm sure many of you, and I know we talked about the fungibility between PR and marketing in the previous session. Creativity, or the ability to tell a story, to be clear and sharp on what you want to say and yet hold your audience's attention, is also really important, because you can have the best thing in the world to say, but if nobody is hearing you, then there's really limited point. The sixth one, and this one is becoming really large, the need to be transparent. Earlier, you could just have, you could say, there wouldn't be question. Now, if you think about ingredient transparency, if you think about company practice transparency, if you think about all of the work that is being done around ESG, all of that is with a view to giving people a step inside the company to say, this company that does this and creates this brand, beyond that product that they are giving you, what do they stand for? What do they do? What do they think? What is their purpose? All of that is now available in the public domain, and this heightened need for transparency being driven both by regulators as well as consumers becoming, again, really critical. Little room to hide these days. And then, of course, the last one, everybody knows when they've been somewhere and someone is desperately trying to sell them something, and you're thinking that if I'm desperately being sold something, clearly that something can't be worth having. And so the ability to trust that the people that you're talking to are intelligent and will take intelligent decisions without the hard sell is perhaps the seventh one that we thought about. And with that, I want to end with this, which is really this whole idea, and why I started with the grandmother and the grandchild communication is because at the core of the Colgate philosophy of how to build brand trust is one single premise. Firstly, we are here because we want to improve the oral health of the country, and everything that we do goes towards that end. And we are here because for the 85 years before this, many, many people have built us a legacy that we hope we can carry on and hand over to the subsequent generations, just as that grandmother and grandchild have done. So thank you very much for your attention. It's truly been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much, Prabha. I want you to be seated while I invite Rajesh Mani, owner of Rajesh Toothpaste, Head of Marketing and Corporate Communications at Ashok Leyland. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a nice wake-up call. Yeah.
Hi, Prabha.
Hello, Rajesh.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I guess all of you all think I own Rajesh Toothpaste. I don't. I work with Ashok Leyland here in Chennai. They wouldn't be very happy to know that I'm peddling toothpaste also. So that was a masterclass on building trusted brands. And I liked that slide where you said that most trusted to most penetrated, right? Many brands are very trusted, but don't make the most penetrated, the list on most penetrated. How do brands make the transition? How do brands make sure that they translate that trust to penetration? What are the things that a brand should do to make that transition?
So firstly, it's lovely to see you, and apologies for the Rajesh Toothpaste, I couldn't resist. So I think the first thing is that when you build trust, our product is the most penetrated because it is an everyday use product. It is everyday use, it is everyday price, and therefore it is in a lot of homes. If we were to sell a product that was significantly more expensive or had significantly lower usage, we could perhaps find ourselves in a situation where trust was really high, but penetration was really low. But in my experience, the minute you've had the privilege of earning consumers' trust, if they are in the market for that category, then they are likely to be your consumers. And I'll give you a very recent example. We are renovating our home, utter nightmare, separate conversation. But for the whole of the IPL, I was watching this Asian Paints advertising. And I know that brand, I've grown up with that brand, and now that we are renovating our home and we are painting it, there is only one paint brand in our minds, Asian Paints. But if you ask me otherwise, is there penetration of Asian Paints in my home? There isn't. So that's really, I think, the link in my head at least.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think usage does also translate that to penetration. Let's get to a CEO's perspective. I know that I was listening to the previous conversation as well. And we often find that the communications part, the communications function is not seen as an integral part of marketing or brand building, okay? So I have two questions for you. One is, what is the CEO's ask of the communications function itself? And the second one is, how can the communication function be an integral part of brand building and earn a seat on the CEO's table?
So I think firstly, I'm going to answer the second one first and then come to the first one. I think companies that don't put communications at their top table are actually missing an opportunity. because it is utterly integral. And we did have this discussion of, marketing and PR, and they're all different names, but eventually what we're trying to do is to get a message across to potential consumers or current consumers or other interested stakeholders. And therefore, having your communications person at the top table, critical. And just as an example, in our extended leadership team, the corporate communications team sits there. What's the expectation? I think now that is certainly getting wider. In the past, as I grew up and started working, it was to manage crises. So if something went wrong, then you turn to your corporate communications person to say, bail me out, problem. Solve this problem for me. I think that's now become a smaller part of the job, and hopefully in most companies an infrequent part of the job. What is the larger part of the job is things, the new things like ESG, for example. The communication around what a company is doing on ESG. We referenced the Apple communication yesterday, or the piece of, I'm going to call it advertising for want of a better word, the piece of advertising that talked about what they were doing in ESG. Really different way of looking at it. I mean, it's not just a report with numbers and, see what I'm doing. So ESG is one space. The second is the seamlessness between what marketing does and what corporate communications does, that those lines are blurring. The third, to my comment earlier on dialogue, who manages the dialogue with consumers? So when you put something out there and a consumer responds, you should respond, right? I mean, it's like a conversation that you and I are having. It can't be that there isn't a response. So again, corporate communications or the communications role or PR or whatever we're calling it plays an amazing role in getting that dialogue going. And not just because they're responding, but because they're responding in the tonality that is the company. So they know the company, they understand it, and then they respond, which I think brings in a different level of thinking and a different level of expertise. So many, many roles and many reasons why they actually should be on the top table.
Sure. So like you said, the lines are blurring, right? In communication and marketing, and the case in point being the Apple communication, which they were talking about. So is there a case for the communications and marketing functions to actually merge? And I think this was a question put to Mr. Finn as well. What is your point of view on that?
I think there is a room for both, because while the lines are blurring, they're not identical. And the minute they're not identical, then you don't want it to become one and one gets subsumed under the other, because then you do start making trade-offs between what is important. And in the life of a marketing person, the creation of the advertising, the innovation, the reach, all of that will always be more important. But when you look at it from maybe the lens of the leader of an organization, they are both equally important, and having two different people, I think also adds that utility. So in my head, I wouldn't merge them just as yet.
Okay, yeah, take your point. You did speak about Colgate being one of the most trusted brands, and you did speak about the 7 success mantras. If you had to pick 3 top things and to build a trusted brand like Colgate, I know it's not built overnight, it's built over a long period of time, but if you had to pick the top 3, what would it be and why?
So I think the first one is an authenticity in what you say is what you do. And people are smart. So if there is any gap between the say-do gap, then you are going to struggle. So I think that for me is the first thing. So if you're saying my company is committed to driving oral health in this country, then take some action to drive oral health. If you're saying that we're committed to oral health, then make sure that the products that you deliver are improving the oral health of the people of the country, and that you're doing the best that you can to do that. So this authenticity of what you say and what you do, I think for me is absolutely paramount. The second one is consistency, because I think about toothpaste on average about 8-9 hours a day on average. I'm assuming most of you think about it 0.8 seconds a day. And therefore the consistency of messaging, of saying this is what I stand for, this is what I stand for, this is what I stand for, may get internally boring, or you might feel the need to change it internally, but actually from an external lens, consistency is an amazing, amazing thing. And I think the third one is the honesty and transparency part. Mistakes will happen, things will go wrong, and I think those kind of moments, and if you think back to a couple of the large crises that have happened in this country on big FMCG brands, whether it was worms or it was lead or whatever, and how those companies handled it, the ability to be honest and transparent also equally important. So if I had to pick, since you're forcing me to pick three, those would probably be the three.
So walk the talk, transparency, and honesty, absolutely. So, most companies, you see the communications department or the function doing a whole lot of activities, a lot of initiatives, a lot of activity, a lot of action. But when it comes to actually measuring the effectiveness of that action, a lot of times it's not seen visibly. What would be some of the key metrics that you as a CEO would look at when it comes to the communication department and say, okay, this is a good job done by this person because this function, because these are the metrics which I looked at and this is what has worked for the brand?
I must confess, and I'm not going to endear myself to this room as I say this, but I must confess this is actually an area I wish this group would do more, because it is hard to measure. And currently, the way we measure it is in terms of, number of articles, impressions, the value of advertising that you have got through doing this. None of those are actually great measures. And of course, then at another level, we do measure what has moved brand equity, have we moved association with what matters to us. But there are so many activities that are going towards moving that it's not always clear what this does. So I would love, I don't know if anyone in the audience has a point of view on how we could get better. But if there is one thing, that would be the one thing, which is how can you make the measurement of all of this activity so much better? And now we live in an age where everything can have an ROI, right? I have an ROI on near every piece of communication that we put out. So how can this have an ROI would be actually one of the questions that I would love to ask. So I'm sorry,
okay.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, throwing the question back
yes,
at us.
Absolutely.
Okay. The next point I want to speak to you about, or wanted your views on, was that social media is taking off big time, and it is taking off big time, and today we're living in a social media world. And with social media, you see a whole lot of news which goes out, both positive and negative, and you were speaking about handling crisis. So especially FMCG companies, you see that there is, time to time, you see crisis coming up. And what would be your take on how do you handle these crises? What is the role that the communication department plays in handling these crises?
So I think, God forbid you find yourself in a situation of crisis, I guess and this is be my simplistic answer, but authenticity and transparency again becomes really important. And actually the communications department becomes the focal point, because you can't have 5 people adding 5 points of view. So it becomes a singular focal point in terms of how they deal with the said issue. And I got to keep adding, God forbid, because these are not great situations to be in. So those would perhaps be the two balances, that you have a single point accountability of where the answering is coming from or where the response is coming from. And you have a very clear understanding of doing it in an authentic, transparent manner that fits with the purpose and values of your company. And those can obviously be different for different companies.
Sure. So brings me to my last question, which I had, which was, what are the top 3 things you want to leave us with, for communications to be relevant in today's world, as well as for the future? I know there are trends we're talking about and all of it. What do you think are the top 3 things in your mind as a CEO you would like to leave us and the audience with?
I want to cheat and say measurement, but I'll start just with measurement, because that would be truly great. I think what inhibits more investment in this space is what is coming back, of what's the return on that. So that would be, I think, my first one. The second one I would see is a lot of the questions, or at least the few that I heard in the previous session, sounded like there's a marketing function and there is a distinct PR function. I would love if this room and marketing rooms around the country could actually see them as being symbiotic. They work together, and the sum of the parts, I think, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts logic. That would be, I think, my second hope and desire. And the third one is really this whole use of tech. tech, AI, chat GPT, Gen AI, whatever, all of that, what is the role that that's going to play? How is it going to transform this industry? And so if you were going to project this out 5 years, how would you see this differently is maybe something that we would love some perspective on just to take it forward and head in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think tech is the way forward, and we need to embrace it as fast as we can. So that completes my questions. However, would like to open it up to the audience. If you have any questions for Prabha, we'll be happy to take them. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Hi Prabha, thank you so much for that brilliant insights from a CEO's table. I work with the Godrej Group, and my question is, as a CEO of an FMCG company, if you have a communications team, what are the various KRAs that you own which you expect your communications team to fulfill or impact or support you on? Maybe 3 or 4 key KRAs.
So I'm going to start maybe broad and then narrow it. The first broad one is to make sure that the work that they're doing is delivering measurable return on brand equity. I love this word measurable. I've grown up with measuring pretty much everything. So that would be, I think, my first KRA. I think the second one is amplification. An FMCG company does a lot of work to put things out into consumer space, whether it's innovation, whether it's advertising, whether it is new campaigns. How can the PR team amplify what is happening and make it larger even than just media can do? The third one, I think, would be this whole idea of managing online reputation or dialogue or the two-way street. How much are we able to generate interest to get that dialogue? Because I think getting dialogue itself is a privilege. I mean, to the comment I made earlier, I'm sure you don't spend a lot of time thinking about your oral care or your toothpaste. So for you to take the effort to write and ask a question or make a comment or even complain, whichever it may be, actually is quite a privilege. And so the ability to respond to that dialogue and hold the company's perspective and communicate what the organization stands for. These are probably the 3 big buckets. And of course, then there is this entire space of ESG, which at least in my organization sits within the communications function. And that becomes a large space in and of itself where there is a lot of deliverables in terms of us reporting against what we've done. And also, again, putting it out there in terms of the good things that the company is doing.
There's someone else who had a question here? Yeah, let's get the microphone there, please. Want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Lakshman Belaidam. I am from Ujjivan Small Finance Bank. Now, many organizations have purpose. They are purpose-driven organizations. But my observation is that the purpose remains only at the top level. When it goes to the middle and the lower level, it is more about my increments, my promotions, my bonus, my career. So how do you drive purpose down the line and ensure that it is implemented in spirit and no action?
So I've had a boss once in my career who taught me this thing called "and" mentality, where he said that anybody can do top line and anybody can do bottom line, but the truly good people do top line and bottom line. So I'm going to use exactly the same analogy to you and say that I don't think that we can expect that it's going to be a choice between my worrying about my promotion, my increment, my next job, my learning, or the purpose of the company. It's actually an and. So that's for me the first part, that you believe in the purpose of the company and you try and further your own career. And getting the purpose of the company to move further down the layers actually is to have a purpose that is authentic. And then for them to see that everything that you do actually lives that purpose. So I'm going to give you an example that if we are saying oral health of this country is critical to us, and if we're saying, we know that only 20% of urban India brushes twice a day and only half of rural consumers brush every day, and we know that brushing your teeth is a critical component of oral health, what are we doing to move that needle? And are we walking the talk on it, or are we just happy to sell our products and say, you buy the product and I don't really care about the habit that underlies it? So the ability to see that the company has a purpose that they can see is being executed, so to say, I think that's the only way to get buy-in. Because like I said, people are smart. They can make out the difference between what is talk and what is action. And particularly if you work for an organization, you can always make out that difference.
Okay, thank you, Prabha.
Questions at the back, someone? Prabha, I believe you're actively looking at acquisitions as a way for growth for the company. Is that true, not true? Do you want to add to that?
Do you want to finish the question?
Yeah, the question is that part of your growth plan?
So I think companies like us are always looking out to see what is interesting in the market and what else can be done. So I'm going to leave it perhaps at that comment rather than adding anything more to it.
May I ask the next question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, my name's Archana Jain. I'm from PR Pandit. You spoke about the fact that oral health is the main mission for Colgate. So that's a behavioral change program as we define it amongst consumer, in our parlance. So give us a few examples, either from Colgate, yes, absolutely, of how those kind of programs are actually administered within the system, because these are very, very long-term programs. It's, we frequently are asked this when we go in for a pitch to an organization. So say, okay, we want to make this behavioral change program, and to our mind, a lot of times we say, but that's the mission of your organization. So what have you done so far? And why are you looking at us to define that? You should say, okay, we've done these things so far. How else can we further amplify it? So I'm looking for some sort of, operational responses from a CEO's perspective so that we can answer it when we are posed with those questions.
So firstly, thank you for the question, and I don't know how long this audience has on this particular subject, but I'll try and keep it short. I think this idea of oral health being critical to our mission actually starts with foundational oral health. So we start at school level, because most of the good habits that we've learned, some not so good, but most of the good habits that we've learned actually have come when we were in our foundation ages. And so the work that Colgate does under the aegis of the Bright Smiles, Bright Future program is actually to go from school to school, explaining why you need to brush your teeth, and equally importantly, how you need to brush your teeth. Because brushing your teeth is not about, the left to right scrubbing, but there is really an art and a science to brushing your teeth. And this particular program has run in this country for multiple decades and has actually touched over 145 million school children at last count. And therefore, it's a consistent investment behind building this foundational thinking of getting kids to brush their teeth properly. And what we find is that when the child learns the habit travels home, because they take it home and they explain it to their parents, and that's how we see actually behavior in this country move. And this one single flagship program actually has moved toothpaste penetration in this country to being now almost universal. So it's this kind of work, and it's the commitment and money and effort and the walk the talk that goes behind this kind of work that actually, goes back to the purpose to the previous question, which actually tells the rest of our company that we're serious about this mission. This is not just about us, putting it up there on a chart for when visitors come.
Brilliant. Okay. Sorry, we're running out of time. Apologies for that. Thank you so much, Prabha. Thank you so much, Rajesh.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Prabha.
Thank you so much.
Talking to you.
We join in for a group photograph, please.